Hi, welcome back to Wine and Culture, where we talk about the joys of wine in various cultures. I'm Trudy Hannah of Pie Imports. Join me today as we talk about the wine business and how wines make it to your favorite restaurant, retailer, and even your own table at home. For this wine business that we're going to feature, let me just read some of their reviews here. One says, I wish I had Deborah Gray's book at hand during my wine importing days. This book is essential reading. Thomas Matthews, executive editor of Wine Spectator. Here's another one. There are many great importers from all over the world, but in the 15 years I was associated with Deborah Gray, she always stood out as the most professional, unfailingly ethical, knowledgeable, and enthusiastic. She is highly respected by all distributors, retailers, and restaurateurs. And anytime she was in the marketplace, everyone wanted Deborah to visit. Working with Deborah Gray has been one of my greatest highlights in the 30 plus years I have been in business. If you need help with your business, you need Deborah on your team. So come join me as we learn more from this great businesswoman and this unique wine business in Bluestone Wine Solutions. Tune in and please don't forget to subscribe. So, in celebration of Women's History Month, I'm more than happy to introduce to you another esteemed SHEroe in the wine industry. This guest is actually one of those I'm looking up to. Let's give it up for Deborah Gray, owner, importer of Bluestone Wine Solutions, and my mentor. Hello, Deborah. Happy Women's History Day and National Women in Wine Day, which was in March, but we're still celebrating it. How's everything going?
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, Trudy. Everything's going well, and I love it that we can continue to celebrate women, which is something we should be doing all throughout the year. If you think about it, we have a lot of time to make up for and a lot of progress that still needs to be made.
Yes, I totally agree with that. You're so right. So, Deborah, at this point, please share with us who Deborah Gray is and your role at Bluestone Wine Solutions.
Well, I wear many hats. I'm a licensed importer, a federal importer. I hold a California distributor license. I am also a consultant to the wine industry, and I write wine business books, and I teach at San Diego State University, and I have been and I'm continuing to be a consultant to UC Davis. So I'm not sure if I can fit any more things in, but I never say no.
Oh, absolutely, good for you. That's the thing about women. We're such good multitaskers, right?
I think so. And also, there's a little bit of an element of we don't want to miss an opportunity.
Yes.
We don't want to close a door or not walk through an opening. And I think that remains part of my life, part of my approach to things, even after 30 years in the business.
Wow. That's nice. So, Deborah, according to a 2019 Women of the Wine and Spirits, Women in the Workplace report, just 16% of the wine industry's vice president level employees are women. And according to a 2020 Women Winemakers of California report, women hold just 14% of California's leading winemaker positions. Also, let's take a look at this. This is an article that I found. On September 13, 2021, an article by written by Tanya Morning, Star Darling, published in Gil Som, Women in Wine, Systematically Inclusion and the Success of Tenacious Women, much like what we were just talking about. Since early wine history, women have been systematically excluded from power. Yet, despite the barriers of their participation, tenacity, women have been making their mark on the narrative of wine since it was first discovered. While advancements in equality and inclusion have been made, particularly over the last 100 years, there is still much work to be done. By examining the nature of systematic exclusion and the lessons of strong-willed women who succeed despite the obstacles, we can gain insight into contemporary challenges and design a path forward to create a more equitable and dynamic world of wine. This article primarily focused on women in winemaking and wine business ownerships, although not without recognition of the many levels of contributions women have made across the industry. So, Deborah, with that being said, based on this article, what are your views on the lack of representation of women in the wine business?
Well, Trudy, I think this goes back to really to after Prohibition, when alcohol was allowed again. I think it was 1933. It was controlled by men, let's face it. I mean, men controlled in every industry. But they, yes.
Even try to control us.
And in the wine industry, there was the same element that had brought illegal wine to people during Prohibition, such as the mafia, and that type of underground element was still going to then have their foothold in the liquor industry. We wouldn't call it the wine industry, it was the liquor industry. So they were the ones who were setting up the laws, setting up the distributions in different states, had the money and the power to make legislation happen, and controlled the liquor industry, the alcohol industry, for many, many, many years. Now, I started my business in 1992, and I know that there were still, up in the Northeast, I know there were companies that were still part of some kind of, little bit of a suspect family background. And I think that this was definitely something that was going to both dissuade women to enter it and be an actual impediment to women entering it. Women were ornaments. They were to be paraded as somebody who could present a product. This went on for forever. That trade shows, you've got attractive women. That is still something that goes on. You've got a model type that is going to try to draw people in. And so there were no opportunities for women, no opportunities. I'll give you an example. In 1993 or 4, I secured distribution in New Jersey. And it was a large distributor. And I went up to do a presentation. I was so green. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was always just plunging ahead blindly. So I went up to do this presentation, and very large distributor, a sea of faces in front of me. I mean, dozens of middle-aged white men.
Right.
I have to say, the stereotypical big belly, this kind of guy who sat back, he's having good meals every day, and he was a liquor salesperson. So a liquor salesman, and I'm trying to sell wine. Now, to the credit of that distributor, they were eager to bring on my wines. They were good Australian wines. I had a nice little portfolio established by then. And they wanted me to educate this very entrenched group of men.
Right.
So before I started my presentation, one of these guys took me aside and he said, hey, I'll give you a bottle of this new liqueur if you keep your presentation under 10 minutes. So that was the extent of his interest. And I could see it. I could see it in that sea of faces.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that didn't make any impression on me having a liqueur bottle, you know, okay, I'm going to keep my presentation under 10 minutes. But it definitely stuck with me. What I had to do was break down barriers one by one. I had to work with those guys as individuals. I had to talk to them on an economic level and say, this is what this wine is about, why you can sell it, how you can make money. Mm-hmm. So I realize I'm getting off track a bit, but that was
you're fine. You're fine.
Those were some of my attempts in the early days to overcome that very sexist barrier. Also, I have to say, we as women have to push those barriers down. Mm-hmm. We have to force our way through, not in a mean and nasty, aggressive way, mm-hmm. but we have to say they're not there. Right. Those barriers are not there. We have to find a way through, over, under, through, pretend they're not there, and just do our thing. Because if you allow men to tell you this is what you should do, you will never make any progress. And that's what I did, partly through ignorance. I have to say, that was just something I was determined to do. But I did have a career prior to the wine business, and I had experienced all the sexism and all of the overcoming of barriers in that. And I thought, this is not going to stop me. And I don't think it has. I haven't been aggressive, and possibly to my detriment, I haven't been as tenacious as men would be. Mm-hmm. But I do feel that we have to take that approach sometimes.
Yeah, and Deborah, I hear you say that you haven't been as tenacious. I'm gonna, for the time that I've known you, you've been very, what's the word I want to use? You've been very matter of fact about things. And I think that's a very good trait to have, being in this industry, because you have to tell people the truth about what they're buying, what they're, the quality of the wines, the price selection, what you can and cannot do. And there's no fluff around that, and you're the type of person that you don't deal with the fluff. You hit straight to the point. This is what this is, So, mm-hmm. I for the time that I've been in this industry, I think that I find that a lot of people don't take women seriously, and especially women of color. It's just, which is very interesting to me, because it's all the same wine.
Exactly, Trudy. Oh my gosh, you hit the nail on the head, didn't you? Yeah. These are preconceived notions that people have about who we are, right, and have nothing to do with the wine. They look at, you're a person of color, you don't belong in this industry, or you must not know what you're talking about, or you must have stumbled upon something by mistake. I'm a woman, I get that to a degree, not as much as you would, but it is so frustrating. Mm-hmm. And I feel that the way that we can overcome that, and we can't overcome everybody. There's sexism and racism in this world, and we acknowledge it. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
But to a great degree, some preconceived notions are subconscious, and they don't recognize it. It's ingrained. And you work in the South a lot, and that's particularly ingrained there. And I think in those instances, if we are not greeted with, outright rudeness and, opposition, we act as if it's not there.
Right.
We prove ourselves. We prove ourselves by being professional and showing that we have the knowledge and the product to
back it up. Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's just as good and worthy as what some of the men have. So,
and sometimes much more so.
Exactly. So you answered my next question. So I'm just technically going to skip that one and go on to this next one. So what prompted you to explore business in the wine industry, given the lack of women representation?
Well, there is a specific reason, but I'll say, first of all, a lack of representation would never have deterred me. And I think that I have, addressed some of that, in that I don't feel I have ever looked at something and said, oh, I can't do that. Now, sometimes foolishly, I may have gone ahead and done something and thought, oh, gosh, that was a bit risky, or why that didn't work out or something. But in the wine industry, there was a little bit of ignorance is bliss, and a little bit of there's no reason, absolutely no reason why I can't do this. But to give you something, the practical reason why I got into the business was because I started with my father's wine. Now, my father is deceased now, and but he started a wine region in Australia, the appellation of Cowra. He planted the first grapes there. And he started several years later, when his grapes, the wine that was being made from his grapes were winning awards and getting a lot of attention. He thought that he should make a brand. And so he did. And then he tried to export. I was in another business. He tried to export to the US. He had two different importers, both of whom kept his wine and didn't pay him. One went bankrupt and his wine was seized with the warehouse in some sort of a debt situation. The other one just said, he couldn't sell it and obviously didn't know what he was doing. So he said, can you help me? Now, he didn't mean, can you become an importer? Just, can you help me figure this out and find something? And so the more I looked at it, the more I thought, this is much more interesting than what I'm doing now. And so we talked, and having one brand, as you are probably aware, unless it's a big brand with lots of wines, it is not always going to be enough for a business, enough to support you, enough to have a sustainable business. So what we did was put together, my dad was very instrumental in this, put together a consortium of brands. And those small brands had never been in the US before. And he, because of his reputation and his time in the wine industry, he was able to convince them to have me as the importer. And that's how I started, with a selection of unknown, very small brands. In deciding to become an importer, I had never been in the wine industry. I had never had any experience in it. And I just started from day one looking at how I went about it. And the first thing was to get a license and moving forward from that.
Deborah, thank you for that. I really appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you so much. So, Deborah, let's shift our discussion to Bluestone Wine Solutions. Describe the business and the services you offer.
Well, Bluestone Wine Solutions was started in the end of 2007. I did have another company before then called the Australian Wine Connection. For a brief period of time, that was the business I started in 1992. And for a brief time, I had a partner, and that didn't work very well. So I left that company to him in 2007 and started Bluestone Wine Solutions at the end of 2007. Now, 2008, if you were around for that, was the start of the recession. So it was not only the start of the recession, but it was the perfect storm of events for Australian wine. The exchange rate suddenly became very unfavorable. There was a lot of pushback to Australian wines above a certain price point.
Mhm.
There was a feeling that they had become too generically tied to Robert Parker's palate.
Mhm.
And it was the end of Australian wines, except for Yellowtail.
Right.
So it was the rise of Yellowtail. And,
Uh-huh.
you know, kudos to Yellowtail.
Who
But it
doesn't
meant
know
that my,
Yellowtail, right? Yes.
but it meant that my business ground to a halt, because I had then at that time intended to take on more wines. I did take on some wines. I still did throughout 2008 and part of 2009. There were a couple of large, very prominent importers that went bankrupt, went out of business, and I took on some really iconic Australian wines. And I thought surely they would break through. Wines with 98 Parker points, you know, things that were amazing. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter. The points no longer mattered. So I then had to turn my attention to something else. And it was when I started writing in 2009, I started writing my first book. And it gave me the opportunity to write, having no business. And then it was finally published through a what at the time was considered a one of the mainstream wine book publishers, and in 2011. So having a little bit of business, and also because I took on some other brands that weren't Australian, I tried to do some other things.
Mhm.
Having the book come out, the book brought me my consulting clients. I started my consulting business at that time.
Mhm.
And that has really become the mainstay of my business. I import 2 brands, not still. I took on 2 brands in the last 2 or 3 years. And one extremely iconic wines from Australia. Well, it's a relatively new brand, but the winemaker is a celebrated winemaker in Australia. And so he had started a new brand and asked me. I had imported his brand before. He asked me to import this one. I have a brand from that I import from Patagonia. And but primarily I consult to the wine industry. I also teach part-time at San Diego State, and I'm continuing to write wine business books.
Nice. Awesome. That's so interesting.
So that's another thing that I always feel, Trudy, as what people should do this, but as women, I feel one of our strengths and one of the things that we sometimes need to do is reinvent ourselves.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Life is always changing. And when you have kids or, or a partner or a spouse, everything is, your life has to change with theirs. So what you're doing has to change. So it makes perfect sense. I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Well, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Deborah, one other question I have for you, just a few more questions. As a wine business owner, what struggles have you faced, and any challenges that you've had to overcome, and what lessons were learned from those challenges and struggles?
Well, I made every mistake imaginable.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was due to the fact that I was going to prove that I could do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't, and I don't say that as a positive. That was something that I felt I needed to prove myself. I needed to say, I can do this. I don't need help. I don't need to rely on anybody else or even find out how they did something. So it was good and bad. I learned everything through trial and error. So I learned how to do everything And they were some great lessons, but there were some also very hard lessons, very expensive lessons, because I didn't ask. And as I say, I learned from it all. I think that that's the greatest thing that we can get from our lessons, is to learn from them and hopefully not make those same mistakes again. But one of the things I have learned, even at my age and my stage of experience, is you should ask for help. Have resources. Look to other people for their expertise. Don't think that you have to do it all. And I know, Trudy, that that's something that I admire in you, because you have gone outside yourself to outside of your expertise and recognized that you're new to things, and you have looked to, where can I get the information I need for this? Where can I get the resource for that? And I wish I had done that sooner, but I've learned it's a really important part of what you should do in business. Whether or not it's a collaboration or simply asking for help from somebody, some answers to questions, a way to do something that's better or that has already been done. We don't all have to reinvent the wheel.
Nice. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for giving me that salute. And you can use that in your third edition of your book too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh goodness. Oh, you don't. I'm just teasing. So, Deborah.
That's good. Why not? Why not?
So, Deborah, it has been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Trudy. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. So, to our beloved viewers, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the chat regarding the topic. If you have any questions, please comment down below. You may also visit our website at www.pieimports.com. Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you.